Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Come on in. Come on in. Good evening, everybody. We're on for another walking through the Bible, second one for the day. My wife came on, Pastor Tamika came on earlier today, and here we are on again. So we want to go ahead and good evening, Sister Liz. We want to go ahead and get this started and get you guys back your evening. Um, Today, my scriptures, my chapters are Ezekiel 5, 6, 7, and 8. And Pastor Tamika came on earlier and she brought on, I think it was 1 through 4. And she kind of gave an overview as to what Ezekiel was about. And she left off at 4 and it started to turn to God's wrath to his people. And as we start with chapter 5, we do see that God is talking about his wrath and how he is at a place of anger with his people. He is a jealous God. He says in his word that he is a jealous God, that there should be no God before him. And what he's seeing is that the people of Israel had placed multiple gods before him, and he's fed up. He is just tired of it, and he is making sure that he lets his people know. And what his plan is now destruction. His plan is to destroy the people and the city. Now, the city of Jerusalem was meant to be the city that it was basically a beacon, a place of God's love and his peace, and all the surrounding cities were to be cities that looked to Jerusalem. But because of the fact that they had rebelled against God, because of the fact that they decided that they wanted to live their way, live their own life, live the way that they wanted to live, what that did was it caused God to say that he was going to destroy Jerusalem. And so we look here, and in the beginning of the chapter, he talks about the sword of his judgment. And what he wanted Ezekiel to do was take a sword, or like a barber's razor, and cut the hairs off of his head and his beard. And then he had specific instructions as to how to disperse them into thirds. And he decided how he was going to destroy according to the specific thirds of what he did with the hair. He was supposed to divide it into equal weight, and then he was going to explain how he was going to destroy Jerusalem. God bless you, my beautiful bride, my love, Pastor Tamika. Thank you for coming on. Um, so God promised severe judgment against Jerusalem. And so throughout chapter 5, he speaks of how he's going to perform this specific um, destruction to Jerusalem. Um, so not only did he say he was going to destroy um, Jerusalem, but towards the end of the chapter, it actually shows or says that he's basically setting Jerusalem up to be mocked. So people will walk past the city of Jerusalem, and they will be taunting the taunting the people of the city, whoever had not passed, whoever had not died, they were going to be taunted. And then what's interesting is that he was going to also cause a famine in the land. um, he was going to cause a famine in the land, and so with that famine it was going to kill the people. um, it's towards the end of the chapter he talks about how he was going to turn Jerusalem into rubble, and the nations who walk by it will joke and laugh at Jerusalem. God bless you, Pastor Frankie, my brother. I love you so much, sir. um, and when he finished with his punishment, he said that it was going to almost look like a horror, um, a horrible sight among the surrounding nations. So the surrounding nations were going to look at Jerusalem and think such a horrible thing has taken place. And so he was destroying Jerusalem. If you go on to chapter 6, is the heading on this basically states that um, he turned Israel into a wasteland. And what God was doing was he was causing his judgment um, to cause, hopefully, restoration from idolatry. Because what had happened was they were all worshiping idols, different types of lowercase g gods. And so he had he was turning Jerusalem into wasteland. And what he was doing was he was also saying that they will be destroyed, but they will know that I am God. They will know that I am God. He also stated, and this is what he promised that there will still be a remnant. There will still be a remnant. He said, yet I will leave a remnant so that you may have some who will escape the sword among the nations when you are scattered throughout all the country. So he still, even in his deciding to destroy Jerusalem, he still said that he was going to leave a remnant for those who will be able to, who will be able to say, I am from Jerusalem. And yes, there was such a travesty and such a disaster that happened there, but God spared my life. And when he spared their lives, he caused spiritual renewal for the remnant. So he's causing those who have known that they have sinned, known that they had done wrong, known that they had caused God to be angry. Pastor Yah, it's good to see you. Good to see you. The pastors are on. So he had caused the remnant to be able to almost come to themselves and say, I have been spared, I have been able to make it through. And with that, that will cause me to run back to God. That will cause me to run back to the one true living God. So it's in chapter 6, around the ninth and the 10th verse. Then those of you who will escape will remember me among the nations where they are carried captive, because I was crushed by their adulterous hearts, which has departed from me, by their eyes which play the harlot after their idols, will loathe themselves for the evils which they committed in all of their abominations, and they shall know that I am the Lord. All he was saying was, you will know that I am God. Throughout all of this, you will know that I am God. I am the one who caused all this destructions, but I'm also the one who spared your life, and I'm also the one that you will be able to come to and be renewed if you decide so, to come back to me. So he's saying, you will know that I am God. I am the Lord. God revealed to Israel through his judgment. He revealed himself to Israel through his judgment upon them. He revealed himself. to Israel. So we've come to a time in our lives where we always feel like whenever something good is happening that God is showing himself to us, but sometimes we take God for granted. And when we take God for granted and we start living the life that we want to live, what he has to do is he has to remind us that he's God. He has to remind us that he's the one that still has everything in control. And so the Bible says that he chastens those who he loves. He will have to sometimes, when he talked about the good shepherd who ran after the sheep that ran away, sometimes he had to break the legs of the sheep and put them around his neck and carry him, because it teaches you to come back. It teaches you to lean and to depend on God. So sometimes he had to break the sheep's legs. So God is reminding us that he is God. He's reminding us that even when we feel like we got this and we got this on our own and we're good and we don't need help and we're doing well on our own, he reminds us, and sometimes he has to break us to remind us that he got us, that we need to depend and lean and depend on him. Yeah, that's chapter 6. And now chapter 7, when we get to chapter 7, it talks about how fate really caught up with us. It talks about how fate really caught up with the children of Israel. Excuse me. And he kept this posture. He kept this saying that you will know that I am the Lord. So it talks about, in the beginning, the first verse, it says, moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, and you, son of man, thus saith the Lord God to the land of Israel, an end is coming. He's talking about the end. He's giving an announcement that the end is coming. Okay. But he also says, I will judge you according to your ways, and I will repay you for all of your abominations. So you know how you're taught when you're growing up as a child that every consequence, there is a repercussion for every consequence. There is a for every action there is a reaction. So for everything that you've done, you still have to pay for it. I remember being at a women's conference earlier this year, and a prophet was speaking, and she said something to the effect of that she thought something. She didn't say it, but God even told her that you have to pay for that thought. You'll still have to pay for the thought. So even if you didn't commit something, if you didn't do it, you thought it, you still have to pay for that thought. Everything that you do, God says that I will repay you for your abominations. My eye will not spare you. This is chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. It says, my eye will not spare you, nor will I have pity. So we see God as a loving God. We look at God and we say, God, you're such a loving God. You're such an awesome God. Yes, he is all of that. But he's also a jealous God. And he said he will have no God before him. So if we're not keeping that in mind, if we're not focused on God, if we're not focused on who he is in our lives, when he decides that it's time for him to step in and remind us of who he is, he said he will not have pity on us and he will not spare us. Why? Because if he doesn't do that, we will be so far off. It'll be harder for us to come back. So he's reminding us so that he can bring us back. He doesn't let us get too far before he decides that he wants to pull us back and bring us back to reality. He kept saying, I will repay you for your abominations. I will repay you for the things that you've done. I will repay you for all of the things that you thought you were big enough and bad enough to do. He says, the day is coming. The day is coming when you will have to pay for the actions that you took. And guess what? You will know that I am the Lord. You will know that I am God. He kept saying that. He kept repeating that. The reason why he kept repeating it is not because he has to repeat himself, but because he wants us to understand the severity of it. He wants us to understand that he's not playing when he says what he says. If I have to repeat myself, these parents when they, back in the day, it's like if I call your name twice, there's a problem. If I call your name the first time and you don't respond, if I have to call your name again, if there's an issue. So if a parent has to repeat themselves, there's going to be some consequences. And God's saying, listen, I'm repeating myself. And the reason why I'm repeating myself is because there's consequences coming. There's consequences coming. As you get further down into the end of chapter 7, it talks about um, um, in that day, chapter 7, verses around verse 23. It says, make a chain, for the Lord is filled with crimes of blood, and the city is full of violence. Therefore I will bring the worst of the Gentiles, and they will possess their houses. So he's allowing even your enemies to come over and take root, or take over places because of the way you decided to live your life. He's not going to spare you. I told you this before, that he said, I will not pity you and I will not spare you. So he's allowing things to happen because of your actions, because of the things that you've done, the things that you've placed above me. And he said, I will not have it. I will not have it. I will not have it. I am a jealous God. I will not have it. And so here we are at chapter 8. What happens here in chapter 8, God takes Ezekiel up in the spirit, and he takes him to Jerusalem, to the temple. And this is very interesting to me, that God is explaining and showing Ezekiel what's happening in the temple. What's happening in the temple. And the reality of it is that God is taking us to a place where we can see what's happening in his church, what's happening in his temple. There's things that are taking place in the church that have no business taking place in the church. There's things that are going on in the temple. And God said in his word that he doesn't even want to be there. He can't be there because of all the things that are going on in the church. We wonder why God is not here when we are in the church on Sundays. We wonder why God is not moving. We walk into a church service and it's dead as a doorknob. Well, the reason why is because we're doing so much other stuff. There's so much other things that are going on. We're there to see the preacher. We're there to see this. We're there to hear a praise team. We're here, and we're not focused on the purpose of being in the temple. And the reality of it is that when we're doing our own thing and we have our own agenda, and when we have our own mission, what's happening is we're not leaving room for God to move. We're not leaving room for God to even be in the midst. And so God takes him up in a vision, and he shows him what's going on in the temple. He takes him into the court, and he says, what do you see? What do you see? At the entrance of the court, the north gate of the temple, inside the court, where the images of sex goddesses that make God so angry has been set up. They had different gods up in the temple that they were worshiping, that were going on in the temple, the place that's supposed to be set apart, the place that's supposed to be specifically designed and built and erected for worshiping God, the one true living God. And what's happening is people are doing other things in the church. They're doing other things in the temple. He said that there was a sex goddess that had been erected. He said to me, son of man, look north. And I looked north, and I saw it, the north gate and the entrance loomed an altar of a sex goddess. Said it makes God angry. Do you see what they're doing is what God is asking? Outrageous obscenities, doing them right there in the church, right there in the temple. He brought me to the door of the temple court. I looked and saw a gaping hole at the wall. He said, son of man, dig through the wall. I dug through the wall. I came upon a door. He said, now walk through the door and take a look at the obscenities they are engaging in. I looked and entered. I couldn't believe my eyes. Painted all over the walls were pictures of reptiles and animals and monsters. The whole, and I'm reading from the Message version. If you're following along with me, he said, but I saw pictures of reptiles and animals and monsters. The whole pantheon of Egyptian gods and goddesses were being worshipped by Israel. God had delivered the people of Israel out of Egypt, and then they brought Egypt with them. When God delivers you out of something, stop taking it with you. Stop taking it with you. So he was showing, God was showing Ezekiel what was happening in the temple. And so towards the end of the chapter, it says, he said, have you seen enough, son of man? Isn't it bad enough that Judah engages in these outrageous obscenities? They filled the country with violence and now provoke me even further with their obscene gestures. That's it. They have angered God on their hands. They have an angry God on their hands. From now on, no mercy. They can shout all they want, but I'm not listening. We don't want to get ourselves to a place where God is not listening to us. We don't want to get ourselves to a place where God is not listening to the cries of his people. Well, the reality of it is that they weren't worshiping God. They weren't crying out to God. They weren't giving their all to God. They had their own agenda. They had their own gods. They had their own way of doing things. And so when we do things of that nature, when we decide that we want to do things our way, God is not having it. He said, I will not have it. And what you don't want is an angry God. What you don't want is an angry God. So I've gone through Ezekiel chapter 5 through 8. I try not to be on here long, but the gist of it, the moral of the story is, what we want to do is make sure that we are worshiping the one and true God, the one true living God, and not worried about having our own agendas or worshiping who we decide we want to worship, or putting everything else above, worshiping the pastor and worshiping the praise team and all of those things. We want to make sure that we have the right agenda, because what you don't want is an angry God. What you don't want is an angry God. So I thank you all for joining me today on Walk Through the Bible. We are getting ready to close out. We're on our way out of this year, 2021, walking into 2022. We're still journeying through, walking through the Bible all the way up until Easter of 2022. And we're so excited about what God has done so far this year with walking through the Bible. I'm praying that his people are being enriched, his people are being taught, his people are being able to take what they've learned and apply that to life so that they can walk this thing out. So I thank you all for joining. I love you all. I love KO. I love Apostle and Pastor Yah. You guys are amazing people, and it is an honor and a privilege to be a part of what you guys are doing. I pray that you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful evening. God bless. I love you. Thank you.